Hey TV fans, today I'm going to be talking about The Beast in Me, which is a recent Netflix original limited series. This has come out in the past couple of weeks, starring Claire Danes. It reunites her with the Homeland writer Howard Gordon, who people would also know for things like Breaking Bad. It's a limited series. I think because it's only recently come out, I will stay mostly spoiler free. I'll just sum up my thoughts and say what I think about the characters and the overall story and just things like that. I might spoil one or two odd bits of dialogue or scene, but I won't really go into major spoilers. Claire Danes, her big return to TV. Her most famous role probably is in Homeland, so she's reuniting with one of the writers here. It's always worth mentioning, of course, her breakout role, her debut in My So-Called Life, which tragically only got a season, but that's kind of where this all started for Claire Danes. So as someone who has seen that show, I highly recommend that if you've never seen it. I think I read in an interview she actually brought Howard Gordon on board for this. Like, it was her decision, I guess, because she had a good experience working with him on Homeland. She said, that's the guy for this project. And originally Jodie Foster was going to direct this. Now, she is a producer on the show, but that's as far as it goes. She's a producer. So the setup for the show is then Claire Danes' character, Agnes, is a successful author, but she's recently lost her son and still feeling the trauma of that. She blames this one guy who was drunk driving that day and still blames him for the incident that led to her son being killed on the road. Her obsession with this or not being able to move past it has led to the breakup of her marriage. Been struggling to find inspiration for writing. She's got this one book in mind, which is a political book. But when she has a chance meeting with the Matthew Rhys character, who has a murky past of his own, where he was accused of killing his ex-wife, something which was put down to a suicide because there was a suicide note left, but she died under suspicious circumstances, so he has become a big topic in the media with lots of speculation over did he kill his ex-wife or not. And he's from a very rich family, which plays into the whole drama. But he's her new neighbour and very controversial figure. He proposes then her current theme for the book says that's safe and boring. And one of the things the drama is getting into is this idea of how scandal sells, how people want gossip, how they want controversial figures. I think you could almost see it as playing into some of the true crime podcast culture and YouTube cultures, things like that. But he starts planting the seed in her head, then, hey, I would be a great subject for this. And I think instantly that does add a lot of intrigue and layers to his character, because this idea of this guy who is suspected of murdering his ex-wife, and yet he seems to happily play into this idea of, hey, why don't you interview me for your novel? Like, he's been through the whole ringer with the press in recent years, but it seems like he's ready to step out of that shell. And a big running theme is that once he talks her into doing the book, and it's like a decision she eventually comes to, having been resistant at first, is then he starts trying to feed into her, we've got shared trauma, we've both got murky past, and almost saying, like, you are alike to me, you are like got this hidden sort of rage, this hidden sort of animalistic side. And she starts writing the book, and that's the idea, is that she is intrigued by him against her better self. But is she getting in too deep? The subplot involving a local politician who is running like a socialist sort of campaign against the Matthew Rhys character, Niall his name is, and his father, because they own like property, and they're seen as like having a very murky presence in the town, and they're big kind of property tycoons almost, and she's running like an opposing campaign and trying to smear him. The Matthew Rhys character's wife, who's played by Brittany Snow, so it's his quite recent wife, but she was like the assistant of his ex-wife, the one who ended up dead. Very good. I recommend this one. I think it's very engrossing from the word go. It definitely helps. You've got the compelling performances. You've got the great chemistry between Matthew Rhys and Claire Danes. Like, this is Claire Danes really getting back to her homeland sort of form, where she's really committed. She's playing a very, very sort of brittle type character, a very complex character, where there's a lot of like light and dark to her. There's a lot of layers. There's definitely moments where you don't really like her character, but she's always quite a sympathetic character, and I think as the series goes on, you feel more and more sympathetic because of the plight of the character and some of the things that she's has to deal with and some of the dangers that get thrown in her path. But she's always a compelling and interesting character, and she has great chemistry with Matthew Rhys. I think Matthew Rhys is such an underrated actor. Like, he's so charismatic in this. He's so good at flipping between parts where he can be like the bad, dangerous boy. One moment he can be very like controversial, and as I said, the drama almost plays into like him acting up. Like, it's almost like he's tired of like playing a role in the press, or just being like toned down. It's really smart when they suspect you anyway. Like, does this make him more suspicious, or is it then, well, if he was guilty, would he really play up this role so much? Like, would he be as outlandish as he is and as aggressive as he is at times? So they really play with that, and I think because of that you get some good tension. There's some good meaty themes to do with this kind of like journalism, and to do with like public perceptions, and just things like that. I think they play with the dynamics very well. But Matthew Rhys is a great actor. He's very good in this role. He's very good at playing menacing and like unhinged at times. As I said, he's got a lot of charisma. He makes the character very believable and compelling to watch. But he does give you these layers, even though I think for a large part you think of him as this sort of villain and this controversial figure. Like, he does bring a lot of layers to the role. When you're watching Claire Danes and Matthew Rhys go back and forth, I think there's just a lot of almost like a back and forth between like good actors, and that's almost what's carrying the scenes, even though it's a very well written show and there's a lot of depth to it, a lot of ideas, and it's very well played. Like, the pacing of it is very well handled from the word go. Like, it doesn't feel like one of these streaming shows where it's spinning its wheels too much. It doesn't feel like there's too much time taken when they could be easily moving on. It feels like it gets a good amount of like character depth and character drama, and it feels like they use the flashbacks well, because you do get flashbacks. There's probably the odd moment where you're just having memories of Claire Danes' character from the past, because you do get flashes of what happened to her son, or her remembering something with the son. And they feel a little bit like dry and TV and a little bit melodramatic, so I might have lost some of that, but I can see how it is important to the character and the backstory, and that might just be something about, okay, it's just a limited 8 episode season, so we're just going to throw that stuff in because we don't have too much time otherwise to show things from her past, gems in the smaller parts, because I can't remember the actress's name, but the one who plays like the publisher of Claire Danes, like she's been in a lot of things. Like she was in Internal Sunshine, she was in the Penguin Show last year. She just pops up in all sorts of roles. One of those character sort of actresses, and yeah, she's a very likable character in this. Like you get the impression she really cares about the Claire Danes character and is looking out for her, and like she has one or two like gems of lines where she's like quite funny and witty. Like there's a line where she's on the phone to a publisher, and it's when they're sort of like shopping the book around, and she just has this funny line about something to do with, yeah, you can tell them, the other publishers, that they can have it their funeral, that kind of thing. So that sort of character you have some fun like lines with. And Brittany Snow, I think, is good. I think for a while Brittany Snow suffered a little bit from being in that crappy Prom Night remake, like that one which was a really bad, almost like a CSI style movie, but really bad remake of Prom Night. For a while, that was what people knew her from, but she's definitely come out of her shell a little bit in recent years. Like she was pretty decent in X, for example, and she's good in this as like one of the more sympathetic characters, like being married to the Matthew Rhys character and having all this stuff going on in the background and being kept in the dark about a lot of the secrets. Like you really feel sorry for her character. She is one of the true like sympathetic characters, because there's not really that many overall. I would say her and maybe like the Lucy Moranis character, who's Claire Danes' ex-girlfriend. And I know that actress best as like Tom's girlfriend from Parks and Recs. That's where I sort of know her from. But they feel like the two characters who are like the most sympathetic. Brittany Snow does a good job, and definitely early on you're not quite sure, because they present her character as a bit of a social climber and a little bit of an opportunist. And I think early on they definitely make you question if her character is in on whatever's going on with like Matthew Rhys and his family. Like, is she a part of it, or is she mostly oblivious? Because there's this scene in one of the early episodes, I think it might be the first episode, trying to be friendly towards the Claire Danes character, and she asks her out, like, do you want to come for a run with me? And it's at that point where, after they go for the run, a member of the family, like the brother of the Matthew Rhys character, I think he's his brother. He's either his brother or I think the brother of the father. As they've gone out for the run, he sneaks into the house and starts snooping around, and we see him. Then he's this character who tries to keep a lot of things under wraps and undercover, and has certain connections. Like there's this whole thing with like the FBI and this one agent who's been investigating the family, who maybe gets in over his head a bit too deep and becomes a bit obsessed. He looks a bit like Alex Winter out of Bill and Ted, by the way, which is pretty funny. So you've got a whole plot with that stuff. Sneaks into the house when they go for a run. So a scene like that maybe makes it look like Brittany Snow's character is manipulating things a little bit, trying to get her out the house so they can do that. But I don't know. Without going into spoilers, it's not necessarily as simple as that. But I thought she played quite a nice role. Jonathan Banks is obviously very good. Like, he has a real presence as like the kingpin of this family, who's just desperate to keep the image intact and to like always trying to like fix the screw ups. And I think that's the other thing about the series, is then it does that sort of Succession or like Ozark type thing, where it's this high wire sort of thriller type act, where these like shady rich people are going to all these desperate lengths to keep their image intact and to like constantly keep ahead of the game and to try and weasel their way out of things. And I think when that's done really well, it can be really entertaining and engrossing to watch. And I think this is definitely it done really well. That sort of world, very entertaining, very engrossing to watch, because I think in real life you imagine these characters to be really boring sort of guys, people, even though like maybe it's fun sometimes for the press to like smear their names or to like really get into the inner workings. I think if you actually spent time with these people, they would be really quite boring. Because in one of the early episodes, I think it's episode 2, there's like a scene at like this party, and again it just feels like, okay, this is the random shit which rich people get up to, because it's a safari themed party and they're playing like the song from The Lion King, and you've got all these animal type props. They actually hire, I think it's like an elephant, because it's like a joke in the episode. And that's probably one of those where they're leaning into the metaphor to do with like the animal kingdom, animalistic sides, a little too much, where they could have toned it down. But I think it's just such a fun, goofy scene, and you kind of enjoy it for what it is. And you can imagine this sort of rich, lavish party and people actually spending money on stuff. So it actually works pretty well, even though it's a bit on the nose. I think it does a good job of making those characters fun to watch, interesting to watch, but you know, there's a bit of meat to it. There's a little bit of an edge, and they're quite unpredictable characters, especially the Matthew Rhys character. I think the Jonathan Banks character, in many ways, you sort of know what he is from the start. And he plays it very well. Like, he's got some fun little speeches, some like almost philosophizing speeches where he's talking about the reality of getting old, and like at one point he's talking to the young politician and kind of saying, you know, people like you, younger people like you don't see the bigger picture in the world, whereas when you're as close to death as me, you sort of understand the bottom line, things like that. And yeah, he does have these speeches that make him like stand out as a character. But there's a lot more clear cut about him. Like, in many ways, he feels like a clear cut villain. Early on, there's a lot more complexity, or a lot less clear cut when it comes to the son, the Matthew Rhys character. But yeah, Jonathan Banks, as I said, brings a lot of charisma to that, a lot of presence to that role. I think the political plot, the subplot, could be seen as a bit on the nose, a bit, okay, we know what you're doing, we can see what you're hinting at there. Sometimes politics being shoehorned in, if it is shoehorned in, can be like people are put off, or people, I could certainly see certain people on the right having a bit of a bitch about this, if I'm honest. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, it just worked for what the story was. I think it just added a little bit of spice. It helped the politician, like the socialist politician, wasn't an easy pushover. She wasn't just someone who was going to be like bullied out of the picture so easily. And she seemed to have a true moral like compass, and it was never going to be easy for like the Jonathan Banks character just to shoehorn her out the way. Obvious what they're doing with the politics and the themes. It wasn't really a problem because it didn't take me out of the story. It seemed to work quite well into what the story was. The reveals are played very well where they kind of make sense. The second to last episode, the whole episode is a flashback episode, and they reveal largely what kind of happens when it comes to the ex-wife. And I think that's a typical structure nowadays, and I think it's just because the shorter episode counts, and this being a limited series as well. So I think in other shows it's a little bit of a problem, but I think that's partly because I watch those flashbacks and I don't feel you need a flashback. Like, it doesn't do enough to justify having flashbacks. It just feels that maybe that's it's become a little bit of a lazy trope. A lot of times the stuff that they're explaining you feel could have been explained in the present, and it feels a little bit like it's just an excuse to pad out the runtime a little bit. I didn't really feel like that in this. I feel like the flashbacks for the most part did add something, and I did think that was a very strong episode, like the penultimate one where we really get back into it and show what happened in the past. If I just have another like small complaint, it's maybe then they tie things up a bit too much. It's a bit too neat in a bow by the end of it. And I can't really say what I mean by that without going into spoilers, but I do think the way it actually ends up a bit with the Matthew Rhys character, that feels a little bit like they wanted to tie things up a bit too much. I think maybe they could have been a bit more restrained with some of that. And again, that might be just because it's a limited series and you've got 8 episodes and they just wanted to tell a clear-cut story. Because definitely there's a lot of moving parts, and I think most of the moving parts are very good, and they turn it into a very compelling thriller, a very good like compelling drama where you've got meaty characters, you've got entertaining dialogue, you've got a lot of tension throughout, even though some of the places it goes, you might say, okay, that was probably where I expected it to go. Like, there's definitely a lot of drama, a lot of doubt created about the allegiance of certain characters, and like, is the Matthew Rhys character innocent or guilty? But what exactly happened in which case? Because there's suspicious circumstances around his wife. So I think the meat of it is done very well, and it's a very compelling watch. And they make it quite entertaining and engrossing. So they do a good job of making, as I said, sleaze and scandal and rich characters. They do a good job of making them very watchable and a bit more accessible. Claire Danes is such a compelling actress and also character to watch. Then as things go on, there's definitely murky sides to a character, and that's part of the point of the story, but you definitely root for her more and more. And there's definitely one or two twists in the tale when it comes to certain characters. Like, I would definitely say the Brittany Snow character falls into that. Satisfying. I had a good time. One or two complaints, but it's a very easy watch. I think if you could probably binge this over 1 or 2 nights quite easily. Like, there's not a lot of padding in it, if any. Like, it moves at a good pace. And there's so much good character drama, then I definitely recommend this one. I'll give it about 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this. Good time, and Claire Danes on really great form. So definitely getting back into some of the Kerry Matheson vibes from Homeland. So good to see her on this kind of form. And again, Matthew Rhys, very underrated actor. Let me know what you think of it in the comments below if you've seen it. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. I will be doing more new TV coming up soon, including the 5th and final season of Stranger Things. I will be covering that on the channel. So part 1 of that drops next week. So I will be covering every episode of the new Stranger Things. I will have some special content around the show and the new season as well. So look out for that. And I'm also covering Pluribus from Apple TV, the new Vince Gilligan show. Speaking of Breaking Bad, as I was earlier, so I'm covering that show weekly also. And I also do like more older type retro shows from time to time, such as X-Files and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So if you want to support the channel monetarily, you can do at patreon.com/boardnow, or you can become a channel member at 3 different tiers, and I'll link that in the video. You get a bunch of perks, exclusive clips you wouldn't get on YouTube, commentaries, reactions, all the rest of it. But thanks for listening, guys. Take care, keep watching TV. See you soon. Bye.
Why are you here?
Did you kill her?
What do you think?
Niall Jarvis moved in down the street from me. Maybe my next book should be about him.
The whole world thinks they know what happened. But I didn't kill my wife. People just want gossip and carnage.
You want to be re-legitimized. I can offer a new narrative.
I'm gonna roll the dice on you.
Well, all right then.
Don't let me down.
Spending all that time with a possible murderer doesn't scare you?
You're not how I pictured you.
I had a rough few years.
You got bloodlust, I can smell it.
Hope you won't be disappointed.
By what?
The truth.
You're a lot more than people think.
I think we were having a moment.
You need help, Aggie. You'd rather invent a murder than look in the mirror.
If Niall did this, I need to know.
Be careful. Niall Jarvis, he's not like us.
How?
Niall, this book is a mistake.
I trusted you a lot.
Maybe I am complicit. But I'm not a monster.
Like I said, bloodlust.